Anna, you want to start the meeting? Colleagues, we have a little technical issue with the opening remarks. I would like to welcome you on behalf of the co-sponsors for the proposal in the Rotterdam Convention. And I think while we are waiting for the opening remarks from our colleagues from Georgia, I would suggest that we start with the next slide and the short introduction video that presents you the proposal that we have been submitting a few months back and that will be discussed at the upcoming VRS COP. So I suggest exactly if you can launch the video and then we do the opening remarks after the video. Thank you very much.
The chemicals industry is a multi-trillion-dollar industry. There are over 350,000 chemicals circulating in the global economy. The aim of the Rotterdam Convention is to share the responsibility for managing international trade in certain hazardous chemicals. It empowers importing countries to decide whether to accept chemical imports and under what conditions, and requires exporting countries to respect those decisions. The foundation of the Convention is information sharing to enable sound decision-making. The major provisions of the Convention are triggered when a chemical is listed in Annex III. A chemical is listed in Annex III of the Convention when two parties from two different regions have taken action to ban or severely restrict the chemical. The Convention's Chemical Review Committee confirms that the basis for those actions meets the Convention criteria. And the COP agrees to list the chemical in Annex III. This listing process has worked well, but unforeseen circumstances have prevented listing of some chemicals despite the majority of parties wanting to do so. This undermines the implementation of the Convention and limits
and phrases he would never use
of hazardous substances. In May 2023, the COP will be asked to consider a proposal to amend the Convention text to create a new annex in which chemicals can be listed if agreement to list them on Annex III cannot be reached. How will the amendments work in practice? The amendments to the Convention text, creating the new Annex VIII and associated obligations, will only apply to those parties that ratify the amended Convention. The process for listing chemicals in Annex III will remain the same for all parties to the Convention. If the COP agrees to list the chemical in Annex III, there is no need to discuss an Annex VIII listing. If the COP cannot agree to list a chemical in Annex III, the parties to the amended Convention can decide to list the chemical in Annex VIII instead. Preferably, this decision will be taken by consensus. But if this isn't possible, it can be taken by a 3/4 majority vote. Parties to the amended Convention will be able to export any Annex VIII chemical to another party only if an import response has been transmitted. So let's recap. Looking at the COP decision process for listings, if the amendments are adopted and once they enter into force. The Chemical Review Committee recommends a chemical for listing in Annex III. The COP agrees to list the chemical in Annex III. All pre-existing processes and obligations for Annex III chemicals apply. Or, the COP cannot agree to list the chemical in Annex III. Parties to the amended Convention agree, by consensus or 3/4 majority, to list the chemical in Annex VIII. The decision and the decision guidance document are transmitted to all parties. An importing party must provide its import response before any Annex VIII chemical can be exported to them. The chemical remains on the COP agenda for a future decision on listing in Annex III. What are the benefits of the proposed amendment? It provides an additional tool for some countries facing difficulties with managing unwanted shipments of hazardous chemicals. It will help countries to take domestic action to either manage the import of a chemical or not allow the import. It retains the aim of sharing responsibility for sound management of chemicals. It builds on existing convention processes, which will remain unchanged, including listing chemicals in Annex III by consensus. We hope you can support this proposal, and by doing so, support the continuing success of the Rotterdam Convention.
Thank you very much for projecting the video. I hope that was a helpful introduction, and I give the floor to Anna from Georgia for the opening remarks.
Good morning, dear participants. Let me present myself. I'm Anna Beregiani from Georgia, and I'm head of Chemicals Management Division at the Ministry of Environmental Protection and Agriculture. And I also represent the official focal point for the Rotterdam Convention. The Rotterdam Convention is an important part of the international framework for chemicals management. It creates worldwide guidelines and procedures by which countries can exchange data on specific risky chemicals and pesticides in cross-border trade. In recent years, we have faced the fact that COPs at the Rotterdam Convention could not list new chemicals to the Annex III of the Convention, regardless that CRC found that criteria for listing of the new chemicals were met, and the majority of parties supported the listing. This is why, to move forward in this direction, Georgia decided to join the amendments proposed by governments of Switzerland, Australia, Burkina Faso, Colombia, Ghana, Mali, Nigeria, Republic of Maldives, and Togo. And just with a small update, we just received information that Peru also is becoming a co-sponsor of these amendments. This is why we are meeting today to discuss these proposed amendments. And presenting with me today, I would like to introduce Mr. Felix Wertley from the Federal Office for the Environment of Switzerland. We are very pleased to have this opportunity to present to you today on this amendment proposal and to hear your comments and answer to your questions you might have. Also with us today, we have two expert consultants, Mr. John Roberts and Mr. John Whitelaw, who are on hand to provide any additional detail as necessary in response to your questions. I would like to thank BRS Secretariat for organizing the webinar, and I thank you all for taking your time to join us for the discussion today. We hope this presentation and the discussion that follows will assist our understanding of what we are trying to achieve through this amendment proposal. So I would now ask my colleague, Mr. Felix Wertley, to deliver the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anna, for the nice introduction. And as mentioned, my name is Felix Wertley. I am the Head of Global Affairs at the Federal Office for the Environment in Switzerland, and we are among the co-sponsors of this proposal. I'm very happy to present some of the key elements. I think the video has already provided a certain picture, but we have also realized in the past that the video is really dense and a lot of information, so it might make sense to go through again a bit step by step. And we suggest that after having the presentation, there would be a space for questions and comments and some discussions among interested participants of this meeting, of these webinars, to discuss the proposal further. So, where we are coming from. We know that the aim of the Rotterdam Convention is to share information to allow governments and administrations to make informed decisions if they want, and if yes, under which condition, import a certain number of hazardous chemicals, hazardous substances. The Rotterdam Convention does not ban manufacture, use or trade of chemicals, but it helps governments to control the trade because they have the informations. Next slide, please. How does it work so far with the Annex III? So if currently in the convention text, we have the Annex III where we have listed a number of chemicals and substances that are hazardous and fulfill the criteria, and the COP has agreed to list them in the annex. The process to this is when parties in 2 or more regions notify the Secretariat that they have taken final regulatory actions. That means that they have either banned or severely restricted the chemicals through the national regulations or legislations. If that has happened, the information is reviewed by the Secretariat and they check if it meets information criteria outlined in Annex I of the Rotterdam Convention. If this is the case, they forward information to the CRC, the Chemical Review Committee, so the Scientific Committee of the Rotterdam Conventions. And the CRC, they check again if the criteria for listing according to Annex II are met. If the CRC decides yes, they are met, it recommends to the COP, the Conference of the Parties, that this substance should be included in Annex III, and then the COP can decide if they want to list in Annex III or not. Next slide, please. So, what is the problem with the current process? We can say for many substances worked quite well. We have been able to list 54 chemicals. However, there has been 5 chemicals that we were not able to list so far. This besides that the CRC has confirmed that all the criteria are met, they made a recommendation to the COP that it should be listed, and the COP confirmed also by consensus that the criteria have been met. However, by certain reasons, some parties say they could not agree to be listed. We know from discussions that one of the motivations was always that those countries opposing, they still export these substances or they still import them, so they still use it. And it was always a quite small group of countries for each of the substances. And also they oppose it, while we know that the Rotterdam Convention is not forbidding or banning a substance. This situation is a problem because it undermines the convention by eroding the confidence in the listing process. It is limiting the information sharing among countries and the ability of parties to control the import of hazardous substances. We also know that those countries most affected by this are developing countries who might have less resources to fully manage the import of the chemicals. So it affects in particular developing countries. Next slide, please. Those who are following the Rotterdam Convention for some while, we know that this discussion is not new. We have discussed a lot. We had the Riga process almost 4 years. We had meetings where we discussed how can we address this issue, and this issue is widely recognized. The COP has even provided a mandate, an invitation to parties to find solutions to address it. And we have tested a lot of options, and with the co-sponsors, we come forward with this proposal. The idea is that if the COP cannot agree to list it under the Annex III, despite that the CRC have recommended the listing, we will introduce a new annex, Annex VIII. The idea is that Annex VIII will provide a solution for the small number of substances where the COP might not be able to agree to list them under Annex III. It would help for those parties that are party to this new annex, that have ratified the annex, that they can use and apply the prior informed consent procedure and make sure that importing parties are informed and can consent to imports. So we can meet the objectives of the convention, but also we find an additional tool to address the concern that some have raised who might not have been able to list it so far to agree amend, to not able to agree to list certain substances under Annex III. Next slide, please. How would it work? So you see with the slide green how it currently works. No? The CSA recommends the chemics for listing in Annex III. The COP agrees to list the chemics in Annex III, and then the whole procedure goes as we know. However, what we come up now is a solution. What if the COP cannot agree to list the chemicals in Annex III? So the process beforehand remains exactly the same. We need notifications from the regions. The Secretariat checks them. It goes to the CRC. They need the recommendations. It goes to the COP, and then if the COP would decide, no, we don't list it, then we add another opportunity to address these issues. Those parties that have ratified Annex VIII, they can then decide to consider if they want to list the chemicals on the question in the new annex. If that happens, ideally by consensus, if all efforts to achieve consensus have been exhausted, this could also be through a 3/4 majority. And then the substance would be listed in the new annex, and then applies the PIC procedure, and in this case an explicit PIC procedure to have the informed information sharing and to have the control of the trade of these hazardous substances. Just to emphasize, for those substances listed in Annex III, there's nothing to change. What we provide is an additional opportunity and additional options for those substances where all the recommendations have been done. However, the COP has not been able to agree to list it under Annex III. Next slide, please. So, what is the benefit from the proposed amendment? I think the key one is we propose an option how to resolve this blocus, this barricade, this impediment that we have now to list certain substances, while the COP has agreed that all criteria have been met. Due to the trigger function of the Annex VIII, this requires for parties that have ratified the new Annex VIII, according to Article 10, to take domestic action and consider how they want to consent or not to consent, or want under conditions to consent to import from those substances. It will also help that for those parties who want, we have the sharing of information, and we have a way forward how to address those substances that are according to criteria should be part of the Rotterdam Convention, but by some reasons we were not able to list in Annex III. Next slide, please. Sorry, Andrea, do you have the slides? Do you have the slide where we see the scenarios if a party has ratified the new annex and one not? If I'm not mistaken. No, that doesn't seem to be the case. Perhaps, Secretary, if you can just check the presentation, if you can find the slide where you see on the left exporting parties and on the top importing parties. And if you can show it, if not, I can also explain it just orally, but I think it would be helpful to have this slide. Good. I will try to explain it. I think you don't have that. Perhaps we'll try to send you the slides so you can use it in the further discussions. I think important is that we will have a situation where some countries have ratified the new Annex VIII and some not. In principle, that is not the problem. We have the situation already now that some countries, UN member states, have ratified the Rotterdam Conventions, others they have not ratified. I think out from our experiences, our colleagues who deal with that on a daily basis who give those pre-informed consents, who ask for them, we know that is not a big issue. We are able to handle it. Now, if two parties have ratified the new annex, then the situation is clear. The importing party is bound by Article 10, and the exporting party is bound by Article 11. That makes the situation that an explicit consent is required. So the exporting party can only export if the importing party has consent to the import. That is a very clear situation. The second scenario is if between two parties to Rotterdam Conventions that have not ratified the new Annex VIII, that means nothing is changing for them, they have no new obligations, no new tools. If the exporting party has not ratified the new annex, but the importing party has ratified. So the exporting party is not bound by Article 11, so they have no new obligations. However, the importing party is bound to Article 10. Article 10 is asking that the party has to assess potential risks and take action to manage import through its national legal frameworks and policies. So this helps the importing party to check what do they want, how they want to deal, handle such kind of potential imports, and this enhances, strengthens them to make informed decisions. So what if the exporting party has ratified, but the importing party has not ratified? So that also requires again that the exporting party can export in accordance with Article 11, so then an explicit consent is required, and for the importing party nothing is changing, why they are not bound to it. So here now you can see on the slide, but I have to try to explain orally. So we have the different scenarios, and I hope that helps also to fully understand that if a party is ratifying Annex VIII, that will help them to assess the risks and the decisions how to handle the import of such substances. And in case that none of the parties have ratified Annex VIII, for them there will be no change in this. I think with this proposal, what we are managing is we have this kind of early warning system for countries to help to protect themselves against certain hazardous chemicals moving on in international trade. I think it will also help to manage unwanted shipments of hazardous chemicals, in particular for developing countries, and will help countries to take domestic actions. At the very end, this will help to achieve the objectives of the Rotterdam Conventions, this sharing responsibility for the sound management of chemicals and waste, and information. Important to us also is that we don't change the current Annex III. We keep the consensus principle for Annex III. We keep the way how we decide if it's a recommendation, if a chemical substance should be listed or not. All this is not changed. What we provide is a new options to deal with those chemicals that are recommended but cannot be listed at the moment. It is also clear that we always have the chance, because the chemicals recommended by the CRC, they remain on the agenda. So at each and every COP, we can still decide, to add them to Annex III, and then the normal procedure Annex III would be applied to manage those chemicals. We hope that with this solution, we have provided an option that people and parties can accept at this COP to overcome this blocus that we have, this barrier that we have in the Rotterdam Convention, and to find a solution to strengthen the convention in a way that all parties can agree. So thank you very much for listening. I was wondering if you have any questions or comments at this stage. Sorry, now we switch a bit between the presentations. So perhaps the last slide where you can find further information. Thank you very much for that. That's a good slide. So if colleagues would like to join us as co-sponsors for the proposal, you are most welcome to do so. You find here the address of Michel Chiren. He is the coordinator of the group. Just reach out to him. What does it mean to become a co-sponsor? A co-sponsor has no legal or financial implications. It's a political statement that your government, you as a party, support this change of the convention. We very much appreciate if you reach out to us if you'd like to wish to become a co-sponsor. And for sure, we're also here if you have any further questions or comments on the amendment proposal. That would be the end of my presentation. And I would like to invite colleagues, if there are any further questions or comments to it at this stage, the floor is open. Just raise your hand, please.
The goal of better information sharing among stakeholders. It will help inform stakeholders in importing countries in particular, employers, workers, consumers of potentially hazardous chemicals that have not yet been listed in the Rotterdam Convention. And we've also took note of the fact that the amendment is being proposed now by, meanwhile, 11 parties, if I've counted that correctly, from all UN regions, that is from all regional groups of the UN, which demonstrates that it already has a very broad support, which shows that it's a very well thought through proposal, obviously. I just have one question. So I noted that you pointed out that there's not a problem if one party has ratified the proposed amendment and the other one not. I think that's a very important point that you made. And you also pointed out that the process regarding Annex III listing will remain unchanged. Now, I recall that some time ago there were already, there was one proposal to change the convention, and there were some concerns there that it could affect the way that the Chemical Review Committee works. So if I got you correctly, you also said that this amendment will in no way whatsoever affect the way the Chemical Review Committee works, that is, the decision-making processes in the committee itself, as well as regarding the development of the decision guidance documents, etc. So can you just confirm that the way the Chemical Review Committee will work also remains unchanged?
Thank you very much for this comment and the question. I'm happy to reply to it. First of all, yes, it's true. Now we are 11 co-sponsors, and I think it's amazing that we are such a broad group, that we are from all the regions, and also kind of different type of countries, very small countries, big countries, developed countries. So it really shows how much I think parties care about this convention and how much interest there is to enhance the effectiveness. Regarding questions, yes, absolutely. The criteria for a listing will not change. So all the criteria that we have to meet, that the substance can be added on an annex of the convention, remain the same. I think they also benefit that in principle we have a well-established practice for Annex III, and we have seen for over 50 chemicals it worked well. So the way how we develop the recommendations by the CRC, if the chemicals should be listed, will not change, and will not touch upon this. So they also respect the spirit, idea, the design of the convention. We just add another option for those chemicals where some parties, by particular circumstances can't agree to a listing at this stage. Are there any further comments or questions at this stage? I see none at this moment. I hope that is a good sign that the presentation, the video and the slides are quite clear. You find all those informations on the website of the Rotterdam Convention. When you look in the search function for the Rotterdam amendments, there you find them listed, and there you have the links to the video and the brochures. There will be also further opportunity during the regional meetings to discuss the proposal. We will make again a presentation there, and colleagues who are co-sponsors of the proposal are available for any further questions and discussions. As mentioned also at the beginning, this proposal will be discussed at the BRS-COP in May in Geneva this year. And if you have any questions or if you have an interest to become a co-sponsor, please don't hesitate to contact us. You can still see on the slide address from our colleague Michel Chiren, and if not, the secretary is for sure available to facilitate the contacts. We'd also like to thank all those councils that have submitted comments on the proposal so far. I think that's always helpful to think about it, to address them, to take into account concerns. And we're very pleased with all the support we're getting for this proposal and the positive, constructive spirit parties look at it at this stage. So from our side, we're very much looking forward to discussion at the BRS-COP, and I will just hand over to Anna for the closing remarks. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So thank you, Felix, for your very comprehensive presentation. I want to once again thank Secretariat for organizing this webinar, because it is a very important step towards moving to submitting this proposal to the COPs. I again want to thank all participants for taking the time and participating in this webinar, and I'm looking forward for very constructive and fruitful cooperation, and hope to see you soon at COPs. Thank you.